everyone, and welcome to this week's GoMobi.work coaching conversation. Each week, we bring you a topic or a special guest, as we have this week, where we talk about something related to coaching and how your organization can coach better so that your people can do their best work. You can have a great culture and that make everybody happier throughout their day. So we're very grateful to have you here with us. And my name is Wade Bruffy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of GoMobi.work. And I'm joined today by not only our special guest, but also my co-founder, Zoltan.
Thanks, Wade. Good to have you all joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Andy. Just in the few minutes that we've talked, there's a lot of alignment in the work that we're doing. And so I'm really looking forward to having another perspective that's aligned with what we've been talking with you about in our previous settings.
Yes. So we have Andy Vargo, the founder of Own Your Awkward and an amazing consultant and speaker. So we're super excited to get insights from Andy today. And Andy, we wanted to just start by saying thank you so much for being here.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with someone that I line up with. And as I've gotten to know both you guys and Wade, we chatted last week, it's an instant alignment. So it makes it easy.
Amazing, Andy. Well, we have some great topics and a lot of overlap. One of the reasons why I've been so excited to connect with you is because there's so much that we talk about in a similar way. And so I wanted to start off by setting the scene. So my first question for you, Andy, is what is your superhero origin story?
Oh, wow. I love that you're putting me on the spot with that, because that's something I've been working on lately. Yeah, I've been telling my story, but I hadn't placed it in the context of having it be a superhero origin story until I was challenged with that a few weeks ago. And really, I was this kid that used to love to dance. Like, I was this kid that every family wedding, I had a big family, so every summer there was wedding after wedding, and I was on the dance floor, couldn't get me off. I was just the sweaty, smelly boy that was dancing to every song, bad moves, but big smile on his face. And at one point, and I don't even know when, but I just stopped dancing because I got self-conscious. And I knew that that wasn't how you're supposed to act as a young man. I just, you shouldn't be goofy, shouldn't be yourself. Whatever kicked in that I started getting nervous about who I was, I let that feeling take over my life. And I think we all have those inhibitions at times, and sometimes people are better at fighting through them or pushing through them, but I really let that command my life. And for myself, I was gay. I didn't feel comfortable in that. It wasn't the life I could see myself living at that point in my life. So I ended up, doing the traditional thing, getting married, getting into a place where I was not bringing the best part of myself to a relationship or demanding the best respect for myself. And when I was 40, it's like, it's time to dance again. And I, realized that my life's going to be this way. If I don't change anything, I'm just going to be miserable for the rest of my life. So I came out, got divorced, ended up losing my job, flipping everything upside down in life, and realized that the stuff that I've been pursuing wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be coaching people. I wanted to be helping people, speaking, being an author, but I never had the courage to do that because I didn't feel like my story had enough behind it. And I came to terms with myself, realized I could be a better father if I'm myself, could be a better partner to anybody that I'm working with. So the last 7 years, I have become passionate about helping other people do what I call owning your awkward, and use that thing that you might not feel is that great about yourself to be your superpower. And so that's what I'm passionate about, and that's the backstory.
That's awesome, Andy. Thanks for sharing that. That is an incredible story of, those things surely were challenging. And it takes, I think the one thing that's been coming up for me a lot is courage, this idea that we really need to practice courage in order to find and chase the things that we care a lot about. So that is great. How do you find that people's uniqueness helps them in situations where they, like, you've obviously translated yours into this business, this career, this calling. What do you think what advice would you give to people who are thinking about what I want? Maybe I'm not living up to what I want and I want to get there someday.
Well, that's a great question, because that's something I think we all have in the back of our mind. It's like, what's that how do I do it? What's the first step? How do I get there? And I think the first thing that you need to think about is that everyone else already sees that thing in you, and you think you're fooling people. Like, have you ever talked to somebody where you know that they're hiding something from you, and our immediate thoughts, because we start to tell our own narrative in our head about the situation, we decide that the thing that they must be hiding must be they don't want us to know the bad side of this deal that they're trying to sell us, or they don't want us to know that they're hiding something that's maybe has a dark side to it that they see about us. We start to think all the negative, but really you might just be thinking, I didn't brush my hair very well today and it's a little off kemp and I don't want someone to notice that. And that might be that thing that you're so self-conscious about. And instead, if you can walk in and say, you know what, I feel a little weird. I'm having a bad hair day, but let's get through this deal. You've just taken that level of distrust out of the equation. And if you have, for myself, I use that being stuck on my inhibitions to let that make every question that I stepped into, I would think about, how is this going to make me look? Is this going to expose this deep, dark secret that I have? And I would always try and figure out what the right answer was. How am I supposed to act? How am I supposed to behave? Which meant that I was never behaving and acting like myself. And yet, if I was able to say, well, to me, this feels like it's the right thing to do, that can bring a new perspective to the world instead of trying to figure out what everyone else is thinking. So know that that thing that you might be holding back is adding a new perspective, is adding new color to the world. And usually that's what people love the most about you. So like, oh, you're different than everybody else. You're not trying to fake it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. It's so I think we might have talked about this last week, but I'm of the firm belief that there is a group of people that we are here to help and serve as humans, each one of us, and nobody else can share your message the way you share it. It's
Right.
uniquely yours. So that's really beautiful. How do you find that? What are some of the common masks that people wear in the workplace setting? And how does that influence the way they show up?
Well, that's a great topic to talk about because, we step into workplace mode and we sometimes, it's like Batman sliding down the pole, to use another superhero analogy. It's like we're one person at the top floor, and then when we get into the Batcave, we've changed into our uniform and we think this is how I'm supposed to be at work. And that's daunting when you try to sort out your personalities and be like, well, I'm going to answer like this if my wife asks me a question, but when I'm at work, I have to use this terminology. And I just really want to say, what, WTF, like what's going on here? Like we talked about a little bit ago, where that's your human side. And when you are hiding those things, you're not bringing your full self. Every part of what we do in life makes up our experience. We look at our LinkedIn profile, for example, and all we want to put on there is our business professional trajectory, but we might not add into there that we're a father, or that we are a sibling, or that we have this amazing hobby where we've climbed mountains. And all of those experiences have given us the skills that we have to deal with situations that we need to take into the workplace. When something goes wrong, if you've been mountain climbing, you know how to step in and deal with the tragedy. And I have not been a mountain climber, so I'm not even going to have the right tool. But like, let's say you lose grip of your line and you start sliding backwards. Well, you might have some reactions that are built in that other people might go into panic mode. But someone else on your team might be a father, and they might say, well, this is what I tell my kids in this scenario. But when we hold all those back because we say, well, when we're at work, we can only use professional references and refer to, Simon Sinek and, Gary Vee and whoever, like, these are the only things I'm going to bring to the puzzle. It's just boring. And, we could use AI to repeat any of that stuff. And that's not what we want. People want to interact with humans.
I'm going to follow up on that. I love this concept, that idea of, in a sort of global way, embracing your true self, right? And then, but also that connection to thinking about, so what's our professional life? And I would love to hear, one of the things that Wade and I talk a lot about is that for somebody to grow and develop, like if, they have a goal to be, develop their leadership skills, for example, part of that requires being vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable and open. And I'm just interested in hearing how you see the connection between being your authentic self and those kinds of goals. Like, you know, there's a sort of a holistic aspect to it, but then there could be a specific, you know, goal oriented aspect to it. And I just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting because vulnerability has become such a buzzword lately,
Mhm.
and things kind of follow these trends, at least from what I see, where there becomes this awakening and this enlightenment of like, we need to be vulnerable, and then everyone starts saying we need to be vulnerable, and now no one's really being vulnerable. They're just using the word, and it's like, I don't even know that you know what that word means,
Right,
because you're not really being vulnerable just by saying the V word.
right.
However, when we look at leaders, there used to be this old school thinking that leaders were there to bring us the solutions, that they
Mhm.
should be solving all the problems, and that puts a lot of pressure on someone trying to be a leader. It breeds imposter syndrome, because if I don't have the answer to every problem, then am I a really good leader? Should I be in this position? You know, do I deserve the income that I'm getting paid? But leaders are not paid to have the solution. They're paid to find the solution. They're
Mhm.
paid to lead the team and say, you know what? Wade's really good in this area. Let's bring Wade to the forefront right now. And let's make Wade be our shining star in this moment. I have this concept that I've talked about in some of my keynotes about stepping in and out of leadership, and how if you are the mechanic at a company and the trucks go down, you're the most important leader in that company right now until the fleet is back on the road. So it doesn't matter who the assigned leader is. It
Mhm.
matters what your strengths are when they're needed. So we're stepping in and out of leadership all day long. I get on the freeway and the car in front of me is the most important leader for the next 10 minutes, because I'm trusting that they're going to slam on their brakes or swerve if there's a pothole or a hazard, and
Right.
I'm in follower mode. And it doesn't matter if I'm president, CEO, or anything. I have to then follow. So, but being back to vulnerability, it's okay as a leader to say, I don't know what the answer is, but I know we need to solve this problem. And I know that the people on my team are here because we're going to find the solution together. And having the courage to share what you don't know in a way that brings everybody together, that's being a true leader.
Right. And again, to your point of like just being your true self, I mean, that is, you know, if I guess it sort of being your true self in your personal life and who you are, you know, that's part of it. It's like, I don't know the answer here.
Right.
And so that's gonna extend to every single part of my life.
And I think we've all experienced the person who always has an answer, but they think that they're right, or they're so afraid to ever admit that they don't know everything. And I've been that guy at times. Honestly, I remember being the smug teenager where someone's like, "Did you really know that?" And I'm like, "Well, duh, who doesn't know that?" And then I'm like, this is before Google, so then I'm like trying to find a book somewhere to be like, "Okay, is this true?"
That's hilarious. I feel that exact way, and one of the things, there's some people that I look up to, leaders in the technology world, and we've been working on this tech company, and I geek out on this stuff. So of people that I respect, and one of the things that they have been sharing recently is how important it is for leaders and CEOs and people who are inventing things to say those words, those three words, which are "I don't know."
Right. Yes.
Because you're exactly right, Andy, and you said something there that really is the meat and potatoes of our brand and of our conversation that we have every day, every week, with customers, with people that are around us, which is stepping into leadership. And one of the ways that we encourage people to do that is through coaching. So would you tell us what you think about how coaching can encourage people to be a better leader and to step into that position when they're needed?
Oh, definitely. Coaching is a wonderful tool because it's giving you an outside perspective. We can only see the mistakes that we trip over ourselves, and if we have a coach, they might be able to help us see why we tripped over that thing so we don't trip over it again, or maybe even help us flex some of those muscles so that we never make that fall. And not that we're not going to have any mistakes, not that nothing's ever going to go wrong, or that we're not going to have those lessons along the way. But a coach is really there to challenge you to say, well, number one, is where we think we're going what you really want? Do you care enough to get the gold medal, to do all the hours that you need to do and get up before the sun's up, even in the summertime when it's at 3 or 4 a.m., before you go to your day job, to work your ass off in order to get this thing, because they know what it's going to take for you to get there. And so sometimes they're coaching you out of chasing the thing that you think you want, because it's questioning your decision. Like, am I really into that? Or was I borrowing someone else's dream and doing something I thought I need to do? And then the great benefit with a coach is that they have at least traveled down this road a little bit further than you. They may not have ever won a gold medal, but they have been in the game at least a little bit longer, so they can say, these are some things I've experienced, or these are some things that my other clients have run into. Let's explore if that applies here. And it doesn't always, like with my clients, I'm telling them all the time, like, the thing with me that you're not going to get the guy that says, here's your program. At 6 a.m. you got to be at the gym. At noon you got to be eating, salad for lunch, and at 5 this is the next plan, because that doesn't work for everybody. A really great coach is going to be meeting each person with where they're at. And if you need that structured thing, those coaches are great for those people. But if you're like, you know what, this is what I'm trying to do, I got this whole life that's already built that I've got to fit this in around. Now we have to say, well, what's 1 or 2 things we can do realistically this week? Make sure that they're realistic, and then hold you accountable, so that when we meet next week, you're nervous about coming to see me, because like, I gotta either scramble to get this done today because that was my goal, or I'm gonna have to sit in front of him and say, you're gonna fire me as a client because I'm not getting my part of the bargain done.
Yeah, Andy, what are the piece of this that's very interesting to us too is you said that as a great coach, what a great coach can bring out of somebody is helping them understand where they might be tripping up. In addition to that, what are some of the things that you see in businesses that you've worked with where coaching is not a part of their organization today?
Well, for one thing, when an organization doesn't have coaching in play, I feel like there becomes a culture of pointing out flaws, because we get so caught up on this needs to be fixed, that needs to be done. And some of those organizations think that they're coaching by using things like a write-up form, or, our annual review, where we're going to sit down and say, well, in the last year, we didn't quite get to this and this. And so next year, I'd like to see you do X, Y, and Z, or I'd like to see you get to here, but with no plan to help that employee get there, or that teammate ever achieve that. So what you run into employees who are feeling unfulfilled, because they're feeling like, number one, there's something that's so unattainable that the reason that they're not getting it in their mind is because they don't have the skill set or the ability to get there. And if, on the flip side, if that's a coaching conversation, it's, well, where do you really want to get? And if you want to get to be a leader in the organization, then let's work to see what is getting in the way of that. Is it training that you need? Is it some habits that are bad that are holding you back? And we can coach through that by slowly identifying and breaking down one of those things. But when an organization doesn't have that, then they're going to kind of get stagnant. And those employees who are seeking more are going to leave, because they're going to find a place where they have that resource.
What are your thoughts about, what are some ways to sort of, for a coach to think about this idea of, because, I've been in that position where I'm meeting with my coach or my supervisor, and it's like, oh, I didn't do that, and now I'm nervous about, this call. Like, what are some strategies that you have seen that minimize that? So people, like, even if somebody didn't get that
right
reach, like, how can you approach that?
No, that's a good point, because there are sometimes where life happens and something happens out of your control, where it took all of your focus for that week and you just couldn't get the thing done you were supposed to get done. Now, as a coach, one of the things that it almost seems mean, but it's the most true thing. But when I get this look on my client's face and I say, well, that's fine, you don't have to do it. you're not going to get this reward that you're trying to get. Like, it doesn't matter to me. You have the choice. And that really sorts out the question of, well, did life get in the way to a point where I couldn't do this? Or did I use that as an excuse? And sometimes big enough things came up where it's like, okay, let's not dwell on what we didn't do last week. So we're not a step forward like we expected to be, but we're not a step behind. So let's pick up here and make sure we do that this week. Or then at some point, we may need to have the conversation of, do we really want this thing bad enough? Or are we trying to pursue the wrong thing? And I've had that conversation with people where what we started out coaching on in the beginning of our 3 months nowhere looks like where we ended up, because in the process of coaching, they found out that they were chasing something that they really weren't that passionate about, but they didn't realize the thing that they really wanted to do, they had no way to even imagine how that could be a thing.
And as you said, like that concept of they're not sure that they can actually attain it. I mean, that what I found in myself and in others, that just causes procrastination.
Oh, definitely.
Like, I'm gonna get that one off because I'm going to look like a failure to myself and to whoever. And so,
and the fear of rejection is so strong that we forget that the fear of failure is essentially a fear of rejection to ourselves. Like, if we don't get there, we're like, well, if I don't try that hard, then I don't have to say I wasn't good enough, or I didn't make my goal, or someone else beat me to it. Whatever those things are that we don't want to have those conversations. So if I just don't try, well, then you can't say that I couldn't do it.
and we're going to assure what we're most afraid of.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a powerful loop, and I think it's very common. Andy, why do you think some of these conditions, or the ways that we do this to ourselves in the workplace? Because I know you focus a lot on finding, helping people find that thing that lights them up, and part of that is as a vocation of some kind, and you do a lot of speaking with businesses. So when you talk to leaders, what are some of the things that you see that hold people back from expressing that genius at work?
Well, at work, one thing that's tough is we get to a point sometimes where we overly let our role or our task within the organization define us. And then it becomes hard to find happiness and fulfillment in that task. So for example, if my job is a data analyst and I go to work all day long and I look at the numbers, well, unless I'm super passionate about math, I'm not going to find that fulfillment. And if I have this other thing that I really like doing, that's like, well, I just do this until I can do that. But what's critical for people to do is to find ways that they can shine within that position they have in the company, and to be able to say, you know what, these are the things that I have to do in my week. Here's the 10 jobs, but out of those 10 jobs, these two I really get excited about. When I find a number that we can fix and it saves a company $1 million, or I have this genius idea on how we can just switch the packaging on one of our products and all of a sudden it's in front of the world in a new way. When you can find the things within the realm of the world you're already living that bring you the most joy, and then figure out a way to make sure that you're always on those projects, or you're doing more of that first, so that you can bring those results to the boss and you can, kind of have that reinforcement within yourself. Now you're finding a different level of fulfillment in the job that may have just been a task. And sometimes we're told, well, I'm not going to get this at work, so I have to just punch the clock Monday through Friday so I can go skiing on the weekend or go hiking or whatever the thing is I'm going to do. But it doesn't have to be either or. It can be a certain level of fulfillment on the day job that then also affords you what you want to do on the weekend. But within those hours that you're there, what are those things that we can be passionate about? Or what's the different spin on it that I can bring to the table? And maybe it's not even within your task. Maybe it's something within the workplace culture where you love to bake. And so you make desserts on the weekend and you put them in the break room during the week. But that's what people fall in love with about what you're bringing to that office culture. And it's really about bringing those lines together, where it doesn't have to be, oh, if the only way I can ever find peace and happiness is to leave the corporate world and then open a bakery. It could just be that you're the guy that brings baked cakes to people on their birthdays.
That's such a powerful piece of advice, and something that I feel the culture around entrepreneurship and a lot of what's going on. There's a lot of people that are like, you got to follow your passion. Like, I actually don't know if follow your passion is all that great of advice every time. Because if your passion is something like baking and you're thinking, well, I need to follow my passion, so I should make my work baking.
Mhm.
There are a whole host of other things that go into running a bakery that are not baking. And you might be walking right into this trap of being like, oh crap, now I have to do all my taxes for my baking business. And I hate this. This sucks. And I don't can't afford to pay somebody else to do it yet. So um, I think what you said is such a good point. That there's something to be heralded about everything, about everyone. I'm curious in your work of bringing people's superpowers out. What are some of the ways that you encourage people to do that?
Well, it's an interesting lesson I learned from stand-up comedy. And I learned this while I was getting started with what I'm doing now. But when I took this comedy class, my teacher was saying, when you get on stage, the first thing you have to do is call out your disability. Whatever that thing is that gets in the way of the audience wondering, is this an act? One of the guys in my class, for an example, he was deaf, and but to the point where he could still speak clearly, sings wonderful karaoke singer, but he just has a hearing impairment. But when he gets on stage and starts talking, you can tell that there's a difference in his voice, and so he has to first tell people that that's what he's dealing with, and preferably through a joke, so that they're laughing, they're endeared to him, but they're not wondering, is this guy making fun of people? Is this a shtick? Like, they're spending all this time wondering what's going on before they really decide if they trust or like this guy, and they can't even laugh at any of his jokes until they know if they trust or like the guy. Now, when you carry that over into other other parts of the life and in business, just being able to say, I don't really know how to handle this situation, or I feel funny about this, or I feel a little awkward over here because I haven't experienced this, or because my mind works in a different way, or because I'm coming from this point of view. Now you've taken out that element of distrust that I mentioned earlier, and it really helps people say, you know what, this is my thing. Like, I had a sixth grader when I was talking to schools last year, and he raised his hand. He says, well, what if, and this was the kid, first of all, who every time I brought anything up, I was like, what do you guys want? What do you guys have a question about today? And he's like, what kind of mustache wax do you use? And like, nothing would be serious. This kid was just giving me crap the whole time. And close to the end, he just has this really serious question. Says, well, what if you ask a serious question and people just think that you're being a smartass, or being snarky or sarcastic? And I just said, I can be taken that same way too, because I joke around a lot. I'm a practical joker. I said, but sometimes you just have to say, I know how this could be taken, how I could usually come across, but I'm really sincere, and this question is something I really want an answer to. Because people make assumptions about how we're stepping into situations based on their perception of us, and we have to at least be self-aware enough to know that whether their perceptions are right or wrong doesn't matter. They are there, and they're getting in the way of our relationship and our trust between each other. So I need to kind of diffuse that immediately. So if we can figure out what that thing is that's awkward, then we can bring it to light. And now, all of a sudden, that's how it's becoming our superpower, because we are able to say, wow, I'm stepping into this conversation with this guy that I might not have trusted, but I'm leaning in because he's making me feel so comfortable in this moment, or so at ease with myself, that now I can now open up a little bit about myself.
There's this concept of trust that, Wade and I've talked a lot about, and I've been puzzling around this for years, actually. It's the sort of the tension between, in like a business situation, where a person has simultaneously, they're the supervisor of that person and they're also the coach.
Mm-hmm.
As the supervisor, they hold the responsibility for raises and promotions, or they hold the responsibility for maybe losing the job. And to me, that's like a really, like, that idea of all that you described there about that trust, that we can come into this with our full selves. how do you think about like that duality between people when they have both those roles of supervisor and coach?
That's a really tough balance for sure. And we run into that same thing where people start to become too friendly with employees and they're still supposed to supervise them and coach them. And I think it's a similar answer, at least from my perception, is that being able to both be clear with what the expectation is for my position as a supervisor and say, here's where I want to help you and grow you, kind of playing good cop, bad cop in the same role. Like I'm being held accountable to make sure that our department gets to this level. And for us to get there, these are the things that I need from you to do, or the team needs from you. I prefer to use the word we, like we need to get here. We need you to be able to do this in order for that to happen. But I'm on your side and I want to make sure that you have everything you need to get there. And if there's anything that is getting in the way in the company or in whatever capacity that we can help you get through, you're kind of laying out both your roles. Like I'm here to support and help you, but I still have this obligation in my role and to the company to make sure that, we're not a nonprofit, we're not a community club. This is not an organization where we're just coming together for a book club. We do have to be moving some needles forward, and I'm responsible for making that happen. And, I had a boss tell me long ago, if you ever have to fire an employee, it shouldn't be a surprise. Like if you're having all the conversations correctly, they should know. And part of that is basically having them realize what position they're putting you in as their supervisor. So as long as you're saying in a very supportive way, I want to see you successful, this is what we can do. And sometimes that being successful in the end may come down to a conversation about, do we have you in the right role? And a great company will understand that they have some great employees that don't look like great employees because they just have them in the wrong role. And if they can help them find different tasks, that can be part of that coaching conversation too, of, maybe you're not the numbers guy, you're the fluff guy, and we need you on the marketing team and not on the accounting team because our books cannot afford to be off. Our marketing can be a little cheesy, the books can't. But getting the right people in the wrong place. And then if you have the really dry numbers guy creating a marketing campaign that nobody's reacting to, you're like, let's get you over here getting our numbers in line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that the concept of the super clarity around what the duality of those roles are. Wade and I have talked about, when you're having like the coaching situation should be relentlessly positive. Mm-hmm. But if there does come the time when it's like, okay, so we've got to have this conversation, then there's a firewall between what those conversations are. This is we're not coming into our coaching conversation here in the same way. We're going to have a different kind of conversation.
Right. I also think there is a lot of value in scheduling time that, we have a weekly time just for coaching so that people are never blindsided. They can come prepared. So maybe our time, as a supervisor and as a boss, you're always going to have coaching moments that pop in and out, but setting aside time where you specifically work just on coaching. So it's, let's spend a half an hour together every Tuesday at 9 a.m. And that's going to be specifically around how we can coach you and where you want to go in this company. And then every Friday at 9 a.m., we're having a conversation around where do we move the needle this week? What are the roles? So that it's not, am I going to step into this meeting for coaching, but then get called on the carpet about my numbers? Or am I going to be in, while you're in any other meeting, there are going to be coachable moments, but that time as an employee, just like your review, is sacred to you, where yes, that is for you to grow.
That we love that word. That's the sacred coaching time. It's exactly how we talk about it too, Andy. And it's so important, cannot be understated to anybody listening to this, watching this, that coaching time is special time and you have to honor what it is and use it as an opportunity. One of the things that I thought about as you were talking about, we're talking a little bit about how coaching is a supportive function, and it's designed so that even in the situation, one of the ways that we agree that we can straddle the divide between supervisor and coach is by framing everything in this supportive way. How do you feel that two people come together if they have those barriers up versus if they don't, and they're more willing to own their awkward and be authentic?
I think part of that comes down to just being as transparent as possible. And each person really has to be, if they do have some barriers where they don't maybe align, they both have to be willing to try to find positive in the other person. Like, let's say you're the type A personality who just wants to stream forward on everything and just push everything to the limit. And you're with someone who wants to stop and look at all the roses. And this is someone you're supposed to coach, and it's driving you insane because they're not at all your same kind of personality, but your job is to coach them and move them forward. The best thing we can do, I believe, is to help them understand why your values are the way they are and why it's important for you to push everything forward. And at the same time, seek to understand what they're seeing in all the time that they're stopping to smell the roses, because they might be finding solutions along the way that you're overlooking because you're so forward focused on moving forward. And meanwhile, there's a lot of creative solutions that come up in the detours in life that we don't plan on. So if you can find some value there, and then at least come to a mutual respect of, there's some benefits in the way you do things, and there's some benefits in the way that I do things. And maybe I can learn from you, because anytime you're mentoring somebody, the mentor learns just as much as the mentoree in that scenario, because you're both going, well, I guess if I slow down a little bit, maybe there's some creative solutions, or maybe there's some solutions that, because I'm so focused on doing everything by the book, that I can't solve this problem, because I need the creative mindset over here who's going to be kind of seemingly lollygagging around, but in the meantime, their brain is actually working through a lot of stuff. We just don't see it because they're not sitting at a computer in front of their desk. So if we can be open to the fact that there's value there, and as cheesy as it may sound, but whether you have to say, I'm grateful for Wade's, mentality, whatever that thing is, like, I'm grateful that he brings this to our organization, because if any organization was run by any one department completely, it wouldn't work.
I'm just tell a story about myself. It reminds me of, I was working with a collaborator, and I'm that big picture person, sort of big ideas. What are all the possibilities? Mm-hmm. And she was like, let's get it on paper, and and there was this tension between us. And finally, at one point, she said, "Okay, so what are we doing on Monday?" And that became like the joke in our interactions. It's like, okay, I need to know Monday so we can just get some paper.
That's really good. And I think that having jokes is important. You may need some recurring theme of like, okay, so that's great, but what is the next step? Because I'm guilty of that too. Someone asked me about a month ago, so what do you do in your day? And I was just like, I don't even know how to answer that question, because I'm that guy that's just all over the place. But it really grounded me. It made me focus on, okay, well, what are the things that I'm doing day by day, so that I could force a little bit of structure back into time. And if you can have fun with it, even better, because you can recognize, you're here, I'm there. But at the end of the day, we got to take one step forward.
Absolutely.
Well, Andy, as we are nearing wrap-up time here, I want to know what you think some of the most common things that companies get wrong. What are some of the things that you help most of your clients change about the way they think or what they do?
Well, I appreciate that question, because I feel like sometimes we need to focus on the negative in order to find the positive. And people chime in when they, anytime you see things that say, don't do these 5 things, it's like, oh, what am I not going to do? It seems a lot easier to focus on that. And sometimes I think that one of the biggest mistakes is just having too rigid of a thought of how your employees are supposed to come to the table. Because if you're selling something and you have an idea, we're all selling some sort of service, product, solution that we're trying to get to the market. And that needs to service more than one type of personality, more than one type of person. And any business is going to run into multiple struggles, multiple things. We can't even tell you what we're going to run into in the next 5 years as businesses. 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought we're going to run into a pandemic where the world's going to be trying to be like, I don't need a backup plan for that. What are you talking about? In 1999, we thought the world was going to shut down and we had to have a backup plan for that. And so who knows what's going to come up over the next few years. But by being open to having employees and a team that comes from every walk of life, instead of saying you need to conform to this company culture, we need to have a culture that doesn't force conformity, that actually is open to different thinking. And sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that they have a diverse group based on many different things, but they don't think about diverse thinking. And if we're all thinking the same way, we're not bringing diversity to solve problems. So I need people that are going to be like, I kind of am in favor of this type of thinking, and I really like this way of going about things, so that when we run into these problems that we don't even know what they're going to be, or that we thought we were so good that we wouldn't have that problem, that we have someone on the team that says, yeah, did you think about crawling under the fence instead of trying to push through it all the time? Or did you think about burning down the fence? Or did you think about climbing over the fence? Like, everyone's got a different solution, and you might have to try a few of them to figure out what works to get past that barrier.
I love that, Andy. So what are some of if you were to give somebody who was totally having big problems in their business with the types of things that you're talking about, like solving WTF syndrome, as we talked about before, and as we lovingly call it at gomobi.work, what when things are just, you're shaking your head and saying WTF, what are the things that you see in your mind, or that you would advise somebody to look at?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to ground yourself in how bad the situation really is. To really think about, is the company going to close tomorrow if things stay on this path? Or is it, maybe it's not going the direction we want, but is it really dire that we're going to freak out overnight? So that we can kind of calm the hysteria. Because as soon as you tell people or get people believing that everything's going to end tomorrow, if I'm an employee and I'm concerned about my company going under, my first thing is going to be to look for another job. It's not going to be to help save the company. So we got to get that under control. And then to be able to step in and be open to saying, what are solutions that everybody might see? To be able to step up with the vulnerability that says, hey, we want to get to here, but we're kind of stuck right around here. Who has an idea that can get us to there? And then reward those employees. Don't make it, oh, thanks for the idea. We're going to go make $10 million on your idea that you brought up in the break room on your $50,000 salary. We have to actually have it be something that rewards, that has people feel like they are a big part of things. This is data from 15 years ago when I was taking leadership lessons, but I don't think that this has really changed much. But the research was saying that, the top 3 reasons that people stay with a company are not pay and benefits. It's a feeling of being in on things, a feeling of upward mobility, and a feeling of trust and being appreciated. So I think that those human instincts haven't changed. So if people feel like they're a part of the cause and that they are valued, we need to be doing the work ahead of time, so when we run into the problem, people aren't afraid to bring a solution because they feel like they're going to get shot down. They don't want to be, well, we're not doing that. That's a stupid idea. Or, well, we've never tried that before. We tried that in 1990 and that never worked. It's like, what, did you try an internet campaign in 1990 and now you're not going to do an internet campaign now? Like, the internet's changed. It wasn't even here back then. But there are things where we get stuck on what we've either already tried or what we've never tried for certain reasons. And those questions always need to be re-asked. And that employee or that person on your team who's bringing it up might have a different way to do it, or the timing might be right. So just, it has to be an open conversation.
Beautiful, Andy. Thanks for that wisdom.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Thank you.
Andy, where can people find you online and keep up to date with you?
So my website is awkwardcareer.com. I'm always happy to connect on any of the social media. My tags are either Awkward Career or Own Your Awkward. I love to connect with people here on LinkedIn or on any social media. I have a podcast that Wade was on this week, just came out, called Own Your Awkward. So anywhere, look me up, find me. But everything's housed at awkwardcareer.com or one of my social media pages.
Excellent, Andy. And what's something that you're working on that's got you really excited?
Well, I just finished writing a book that is going to be coming out in the next couple months. It's called Own Your Awkward Thoughts, and it is guided reflections to help you master the art of reframing. So they're reflections that I've had throughout my days thinking about situations, and then by the end of the reflection, I'm taking them a different direction. And it's me walking down the streets at 1 a.m. and looking over at a luxury apartment and seeing inside with the beautiful furniture and art, thinking, wow, I'm just across the street from that, like 2 steps and I'm there. And I look the other direction and there's, a homeless encampment in the park. And I think, wow, 2 steps away and I'm there. Like, either way, just, it's things like that. They're like, these are the raw thoughts in my head that take us through this process to think about how do I capture that moment and reframe it so I step in the right direction, but then has a lot of introspective thoughts too, because I thoroughly believe if you want to change anything in your life, you have to change the way you think.
Wow.
Well, can't wait for that to come out. And when is what's the date for that?
It'll be in the next couple months. I wish I had a launch date. My son is actually doing the cover art for the book right now, and so as soon as that's done, that's the last piece. So you'll see that here by this summer.
We will look for that for sure.
Yes, I second that. Very excited, Andy. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure to see you again, my friend. And
Definitely.
we will, I'm sure, do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Great having
All
you.
right, everyone. Thanks.